Welcome everybody to another terrific Out to Sea webinar. We are back after a summer hiatus with what I think is one of the most exciting topics and guests, deep sea exploration. My name is Val Zavala and I will be your moderator for the next hour. Out to Sea, as you probably know, is an enterprise located at the Port of Los Angeles. It's dedicated to accelerating scientific collaboration and advancing the blue economy through business generation or innovation and job creation. It also aims to inspire a new generation of ocean lovers who will develop solutions to the many challenges facing our oceans. Well, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for our panelists, so I'll be sure to put them in the chat box and I'll get to as many of them as I can. And now let's meet our three panelists. I think they're the most exciting group we've ever had. They are all with the Ocean Exploration Trust. It's a nonprofit dedicated to deep sea exploration and research. First, Bob Ballard. He is the president of Ocean Exploration Trust, a world famous deep sea explorer. He's conducted more than 150 deep sea expeditions, best known for the discovery of, you'll never outlive this, the Titanic, discovered in, what was it, 1986. He also found the German battleship Bismarck and the boat in which a future president, John F. Kennedy, and his crew almost perished on, the PT-109. He's been a pioneer in developing advanced deep submergence and telepresence technology. In 2008, Dr. Ballard secured a 240-foot ship called the Nautilus. The exploration vessel is operated by the Ocean Exploration Trust, and I think it's now in Los Angeles, correct? You can actually see it if you're down there. Bob has received numerous awards, among them the Explorers Club and the National Geographic from the National Geographic Society. In 2003, President George Bush presented him with the National Endowment for the Humanities Medal in the Oval Office of the White House. He is currently a National Geographic Explorer in Residence. Also with us is Allison Fundis. She is Chief Operating Officer for the Ocean Exploration Trust. She leads the development and management of the organization. She has an extensive scientific education and seagoing experience. She connects with the science community, students, and the public, and they do this through telepresence expeditions aboard the vessel Nautilus. Allison has led or participated in more than 50 expeditions using deep sea technologies like submersibles. Allison is a former high school chemistry and biology teacher. She got her master's in marine biology from the University of Florida and a BA in human ecology from the College of the Atlantic. She's a recipient of numerous awards for her advancement of science, including being named an emerging explorer by the National Geographic Society. And Nicole Reynaud, she is chief scientist at the Ocean Exploration Trust. She works with an extended network of scientists to lay out their objectives, she works with museums to ensure the scientific legacy of their expeditions. And as an expedition leader, she facilitates seeing those plans through on board the Nautilus. She also oversees the wet lab and mapping systems, and she mentors an amazing team of science managers, navigators, and interns. She grew up peering into tide pools and digging holes in the beach, and has always wondered what was under the surface of the ocean, not just below her feet. I read a lot about, she read a lot of Bob Ballard and Rachel Carson as she was growing up, and that nurtured her desire to explore the ocean and protect the natural world. So let's begin our discussions. Bob, I'll start with you. We're gonna, in a way, get the Titanic thing out of the way, but we can't ignore it. Tell us about what it felt, because it sank in what, 1912. You found it almost 75 years later. There were numerous expeditions. The movie made it incredibly famous. What was the moment that you realized, oh my God, we found it? What was that like?
Well, clearly when we first came in on debris, it was an old debris. We were on the main lane of shipping between the United States and England. And so this was during the war. German U-boats sank a tremendous number of ships on that shipping lane. And so we expected that we would find a lot of other things there. And so when we first saw the wreckage coming in on our video, it didn't say Titanic, it just said something very old and rusty in fragments on the bottom. But it was when we came over the boiler, and we had a picture of that very boiler on our command center bulkhead right next to the video monitors, and everyone's head went back and forth between the picture, and we realized that it was the Titanic. So it was a very exciting moment.
Very, very, very. Are you tired of being called the guy who found the Titanic? And because I'm sure there were many, many other amazing discoveries that get put in, on the sideline.
Well, it's okay. I mean, it could be worse. It gives me an audience that I can then talk about a lot of other things. And I think that's really the Titanic is certainly associated with my life. I know my autobiography, The Man Who Found the Titanic Died Today. But I'm going to have to plug my book I just did with National Geographic called Into the Deep. And in there, there's Titanic's in there, but in its proper perspective to all the other things that we've been doing, and certainly now accelerating our rate of exploration with our team and the Nautilus and the Ocean Exploration Trust. So, but it's okay. I can live with it.
Yeah, and your mother
Bob has made us. I was
Pardon
going to
me?
say, Bob has made us all promise that if we ever find a UFO, that's his, so he can talk about the UFO rather than Titanic.
I've absolutely said that if we ever come across a UFO, call me immediately, because then I won't have to talk about the Titanic ever.
Your mother put it in perspective for you, didn't she?
She did. I mean, in the forward of the book, after I came home and she called me, she said, "Too bad you found that rusty old boat, because you've done a lot of serious science." So yes, and very excited to be able to be home based. As you can see, the image behind me right now is live, coming from the Nautilus that pulled in yesterday from working up in the north, and it's getting ready to go back to sea. And a lot of us are heading out there, and then we'll be heading into the Pacific in October to Hawaii, and we'll be exploring the underwater America. So yes, so tune in, nautiluslive.org, and follow us on our adventures.
Excellent. It's so cool because Nautilus is in LA right now. If anyone's physically in that area, you can go down and see it at Porter Valley. Allison, where are you? What was your first at-sea experience like? Because that's the exciting part of what you do. I mean, you do amazing work, organizing and overseeing things, but it's everyone thinks, oh my goodness, you're at sea. Are you at sea a lot? And what was one of your memorable experiences?
Yeah, I think one of my most memorable experiences just happened last week, I will say, and I'll give some more information on that soon. But I think my first experience was in 2005, and that was really what just set the hook in me for really continuing a path towards this profession. So I was fortunate to be able to be a contractor with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and which is now one of our very close partners through the NOAA Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute that we're a part of. And so that just kind of being at sea for the first time and really understanding all of the teamwork and collaboration and just interdisciplinary planning that has to go into the success of an expedition was what really put the hook in me at first.
That's great. Nicole, part of what you do is, part of what the Ocean Exploration Trust is map the seafloor. It's massive, it's huge. Why is it so important to get a map of the seafloor do we have to map every single part of it, or can't we just map the part we're interested in? To give us a little idea of this huge project and how Ocean Exploration Trust, what role it plays in it.
Yeah, sure. Seafloor mapping is critical. Students who are following along now might remember Dora the Explorer always took her map with her, right? Like, you have to have a map before you know where you want to explore. And with, as people know, we have maps of the moon, we have maps of other planets that are complete, but we don't have a map of our own seafloor. And so we're working as part of a global initiative called Seabed 2030 to help complete those maps. Everywhere Nautilus sails, we collect mapping data, and we try to just bias the ship's track a little bit to areas of the seafloor that haven't been mapped. Certainly, as we go out to the Central Pacific, there are vast areas that ships just don't travel over with multi-beam sonars, the technology capable of creating these maps. But maps are critical for a few reasons. For us as explorers, we do want to bias our time with the ship to areas that are very interesting and have a high potential for discovery. So when we go to a new place, we spend some time creating a map so that we can put the remotely operated vehicles and get the imagery and the samples of the things that are really most important. And, so it doesn't take very long to kind of quickly make a map from the data we collect, look at the areas that have the highest probability for discovery, and then put those ROVs right on the ground and carefully pinpoint where we're going to look to make new discoveries. And I think a really good example that just came out of our research that was published on Hakai magazine and also Smithsonian was some sponge discoveries. You see the picture of the sponge behind me. These are examples of a sponge garden, this highly this area that has relief of the seafloor where sponge like to live. They like to live on hard seafloor, so that's an area we tend to target with our remotely operated vehicles, things like seamounts or ridges. And scientists off of Southern California actually found some sponge that have pharmaceutical properties that are helping with new cancer treatments. And so this is how the work that we do, from creating a seafloor map that identifies the important areas of the seafloor to send ROVs, to collecting those samples, to giving them to researchers to use in the lab, can really yield some really important results.
So if we've mapped the moon and the Mars more extensively in the ocean, what portion of the ocean has been mapped, more or less?
Yeah, I think we're at about 80% right now, and mostly deep areas, and some of the very shallow areas are actually really tough to map too. And Ocean Exploration Trust is working on technologies on both of those fronts. So we have the multi-beam sonar that's on the hull of the ship that enables us to map deeper areas of the ocean, about 200 meters depth to full ocean depth. But we're working, as Allison and Bob have mentioned, with new robotic technologies from our partners in the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute that allow us to do shallow water mapping without the ship. So we send away a small autonomous vessel, a boat, that is robotically controlled and can, survey the seafloor in shallow areas as well. So we're able to sort of force multiply while we're out there.
And Bob, you've done so many, and of course the Titanic's the headline, but what other discovery and findings were you part of that you feel were really important but didn't get enough attention?
Well, clearly our discovery of an entire new ecosystem on our planet that we didn't know existed in 1977 along a stretch of the mountain range that we've been exploring called the Galapagos Rift. This is where the Earth is moving apart, and you have magma coming from inside the Earth to fill that void. And those magma chambers are not very far below the surface. And then as the ocean pulls apart, cracks, water goes down, and then comes back up as hot springs. And we discovered these underwater hot springs, but what was, to our surprise, what was living around the hot springs? Tube worms that the biggest one we've collected so far, 13 feet tall tube worm. Clams that are a foot across that have human-like blood in their body. And when we dissected them expecting to find the anatomy of a clam, it didn't have its internal organs. There was another creature living inside its body that we now call an extremophile that was able to replicate photosynthesis in the dark and completely duplicate the photosynthetic process through what we now call chemosynthesis by convincing the tube worms and the clams to inhale a poisonous gas in solution. So it's very bizarre because we always thought that life on Earth was unique in many ways, that we lived in what they call the Goldilocks zone of our solar system. But now we find that life is much hardier than we ever thought. And in fact, our discovery now driving NASA to look at the oceans within our own solar system. Most people don't know that we have oceans in our solar system that are larger than ours, and in particular on two moons, one a Jovian moon called Europa, and another one from Saturn called Enceladus, that have oceans deeper than ours, far more water than ours, and also have volcanic activity. So that's driving NASA to find life elsewhere on our planet, which I think we're all confident is going to happen. So that's pretty huge, a contribution to science, rewrote the biology textbook, and I think certainly overshines our discovery of something we already knew existed, like the Titanic. So I would have to give that one an A+.
It is. Those worms, what you described, that something living inside of something else, it sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. I think a lot of science fiction is based on scientific discoveries. you know, like Alien and all this kind of, they don't just imagine things. They looked at what is really out there, and then they build these crazy stories.
What's so wonderful about our team, we're literally, and we love to joke, boldly going where no one has gone before on planet Earth. And we spend most of our time in places no human has ever been. So discoveries are almost guaranteed, and it's very exciting. And like I say, you can follow our explorations live at nautiluslive.org once we get back underway in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure all the future and current science fiction writers are reading what you guys are discovering, because that's where they get their inspiration. And Allison, what was your first at-sea experience like, or just any kind of particularly memorable moment when you, how old were you when you started going out to sea?
Like I said, 2005 was my first expedition. But I think in terms of some memorable moments, you know, I'm a geologist, and so I always love going to the hydrothermal vents. That, you know, just really gives me the goosebumps every time I lay eyes on the hydrothermal vents. And, you know, very much like Bob and Nicole's passions, you know, we love being in those environments. But I think personally, I've had, you know, a few recent expeditions that have just really been touching for me personally. In 2019, I was very fortunate to work alongside Bob on an expedition with the National Geographic in search of Amelia Earhart's lost airplane. And so that, you know, that was just being able to work alongside Bob to both plan and implement that expedition was just remarkable. You know, unfortunately, we did not succeed in finding anything yet, but, you know, not knowing where the plane is a big part of the puzzle. So I think we both have the itch and are very excited to continue that search. And then just last week marked another very memorable expedition for all of us, and I was on board for that expedition. But we had an incident that people in our field never really want to experience when you own and operate vessels and deep sea robotic vehicles. But it ended up with a good ending and a very heartwarming ending, and in a lot of ways. But just about 2 weeks ago, we actually lost connection with our remotely operated vehicles. And if you're not familiar with ROVs or remotely operated vehicles, the way that they work is they're tethered. So they're powered by the ship, and they're completely controlled by people topside that are on the ship. And so they're all operated by pilots on board the vessel. Unfortunately, we were operating at about 2,000 meters deep on an expedition with Ocean Networks Canada, and all of a sudden the cameras went dark. And that can point to a few different things, but generally it's none of them are good. And we quickly realized that we no longer had either of our vehicle on the end of our cable. And that's certainly
physically,
yeah, physically. So
it wasn't just a loss of a signal, it was physical.
That's right. So where the cable connects the vehicles to the ship, that actually parted, and we're still looking at the cause for that. We still don't know the true smoking gun for why it happened. But we, within 6 days, and from a lot of support of the deep sea oceanographic community, and especially the National Science Foundation, the University of Washington, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, we were able to thankfully have another ship come to our rescue. So with a bit of serendipity, there was another ship with a very similar technology that we work with quite often, just 11 hours south of us, and they were wrapping up a month-long expedition. They were able to come to our rescue. So we very quickly worked with them to plan this whole rescue operation. We now have the ship, as Bob said, back in LA, and both vehicles are back on board. So we're doing kind of the full health check of both of those vehicles now before we continue on and complete the rest of our 2021 field season.
So when you located the underwater vehicles, did somebody have to, like a scuba diver, have to physically go down and get them? How do you get them when you? Are they much sitting on the ocean floor? Are they floating around? Or how does?
Yeah, they were. So the way our vehicles work, so we have what's called a dual body remotely operated vehicle system. So there was one vehicle, and its job is just to be very heavy, essentially. And so it absorbs all of the motion from the sea surface and then the ship. And then Hercules, our main ROV, is able to operate below it. And so the connection between Argus, that top vehicle, is what parted. Argus is very heavy, so it sank. Our main vehicle, ROV Hercules, is a little bit positively buoyant. And so kind of like, I like Bob's analogy for this, kind of like a kid holding a balloon. Argus was anchored to the seafloor, and Hercules was still connected to Argus through with their tether, and just floating right above Argus. So we had to bring in another ROV, which was on the Thomas G. Thompson out of the University of Washington. And they just had remarkable pilots on board, and they were able to work with our team to very skillfully take down rigging and strap our ROVs, so we were able to recover them back to the vessel.
So it was not a human who went down there. This is all done mechanically.
That's right. That's right. And on the website, on nautiluslive.org, we'll have a video that kind of summarizing that whole event. It should be up later today in just a couple of hours.
Wow. Nicole, can you tell us one of your more memorable moments from your various adventures?
Yeah, I mean, one that pops to mind is one of my first times out as a watch leader in the Mediterranean Sea. We were on a seamount called the Rathastenes Seamount, and we were looking at geological features, these sinkholes. But you know, everywhere you go in the Mediterranean, you find signs of human life. And one of the things we were doing was side scan sonar, so seafloor mapping in a way using Argus, the robot that is our eye in the sky. And so we were able to see out to the side on the robot, looking mostly for these sinkhole features. But at a watch change that I was just happening to come on watch for, one of the pilots that was leaving said, you know, I think over the side back there was a shipwreck. We should go take a look if there's time. And you know, the thing about exploration that's really great is even though you have a plan, you always know, and this is one of the first things Bob taught me, deviate from that plan if there's something interesting that comes up. And so it was really exciting at that moment to be able to make that call and say, you know, I think even though we're supposed to be headed north on this transect, we're going to turn around and go look at whatever that you know feature was that we saw in the mapping data. And it turned out to be quite a sizable ancient shipwreck. It had what are called pithos. So for people who've followed some of our early exploration and know amphora, which are, you know, these vessels that carried oil or other fish paste and things, these were giant, and it's something that almost like a human could have fit into. And that was a very unique wreck type. And part of the work that Dr. Ballard and colleagues followed up on after this cruise was looking at the pattern of the wrecks and the different types of amphora that we were finding on top of this seamount. And I believe what it showed was that, you know, the trade routes, we weren't sticking to the coastlines in ancient times. We were actually cutting across the Mediterranean Sea in places that you wouldn't expect people with sort of primitive navigational skills to do. So it was a really exciting discovery at that point.
Great. You know, I want to get to a question that came across. I also, by the way, want to talk about what you perceive as some of the threats to our ocean. There's so many, and how does what you do contribute to potential solutions, because the oceans are just being assaulted from every direction. But first, Destry, who's watching, was curious to ask about international treaties. Unusual question. International treaties around these hydrothermal vents in the ocean. Is there a way to restrict access to them? Should we restrict access to them? And what international body would be in charge of doing that? Should there be a process to get permission to access them? So you're talking about hydrothermal vents. These are very unusual and important locations, I imagine, that not everyone.
Well, they're actually what we were just talking about. These with the giant tube worms. By the way, before I go on, I want to say hi to, I see another person came in, Kathy Webster in Pryor, Oklahoma. Great to see you. Stay tuned, and we need to stay in touch. But anyway, when we work wherever we go, we have to make sure if we're working in someone else's waters. When we were working in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea, in the Aegean, we're always inside someone else's waters. And so you need to get permission. And each country has different protocols and different sensitivities, so to speak, on whether you can do things or not do things. Certainly when it comes to human history, there's tremendous concerns about disturbing ancient sites. So we always are operating under protocols. When we went to discover the Galapagos Rift and those hydrothermal vents, we were actually in international waters. So we didn't need permission. But again, there are international protocols now going into effect that we have to pay attention to. And for example, when we found black smokers in 1979, we found associated with those very high temperature vents the deposition of very valuable minerals. And now there's a big push to do mining in the deep sea. And in that case, countries like Russia or China that have applied have to go to the United Nations International Seabed Authority. So yes, there's all sorts of protocols, more and more so. And then certainly in our areas, we do a lot of work in marine sanctuaries. We'll be spending all the rest of this year, once we get to Hawaii, in a marine sanctuary and a monument. And so there again, permitting. So yeah, it's a very important process, getting more and more precise as we go along, but we've been successful in negotiating through all of that protocol.
Got it. And I'd love to know your all of your ideas. We have so many threats to the ocean now, of course, the warming, the acidification, the plastic, it just goes on and on. What's your perspective? Like, what is the most serious threat to ocean life? And any ideas about how we might even begin to solve it or relieve it? I mean, it's, you know, because we're terrestrial beings, we're so far, many of us live far away from the ocean, we don't realize how absolutely crucial it is to our existence. And so when all these threats come about, sometimes they're not top of people's mind because they literally can't see it. You can see the trash on the side of the highway. You can't see necessarily plastic in the ocean unless you see it in video. So what's your thoughts about the threats that our oceans are under and how we even begin to approach healing them? I'll throw that to Amy.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think one of the things that we at Ocean Exploration Trust really try to do is enable people to make a connection with the ocean that might not have access to it. So we stream everything that we're doing live. We provide an over-the-shoulder view of the research as it's happening. So people can both be inspired by the science itself, just the remarkable phenomena that happen in the ocean and on the seafloors and in the water column, but also the individuals that are behind all of that. And so I think once people feel a connection to the ocean and understand, you know, no matter where they are on this planet, that they are impacted by the ocean in some way, whether that's the air they breathe, the food they eat, the resources that they're utilizing, obviously climate and weather that we experience now. And so I think just helping people to understand those connections is where I think where we can really play a really important role.
And then no matter where you are, you can tune into, I assume, your website. Is that where a lot of this happens?
That's right. Yep. nautiluslive.org.
nautiluslive.org. Great. Other thoughts, you know, environmental threats to our ocean and how we begin to handle. Everyone thinks plastic. Is that the worst or most dangerous threat? Or is it warming?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we've delved into. So part of the research program that I build out, or exploration program that I build out, is enabling scientists to get information samples from the deep sea that's, you know, hard to access for most people. And so we did take researchers off the coast of California last year who were collecting things like drift kelp and water samples to see how much microplastic there was offshore and being able to compare it to the samples that they were getting through scuba diving near shore. And so, you know, that's kind of one example, but I think one of the things to keep in mind is that so little of the deep ocean has been looked at. It's less than 10%. And so what we're doing out there is getting this baseline information. Whenever we put the ROVs in the water, we're collecting temperature and salinity data, which are two critical properties to understand. But we're also, you know, doing an inventory of species, and what scientists who've looked at patterns of our data from all of the dives we've done, they're able to see where there are range extensions. We know, for example, that perhaps in shallow waters, animals are having to migrate in response to changing water temperatures. And so in the deep sea, you know, I don't think we have enough information to necessarily say what's happening, but we can gather that baseline information so that future scientists have that to look back on.
Yeah, and our senator here, Sheldon Whitehouse in Rhode Island, is very, very proactive. And in fact, he's just passed legislation to create a marine debris foundation. So yes, there's more and more action going on now because we realize, and particularly with plastics, sea turtles, for example, think it's jellyfish or something. So
Oh, I know. Breaks your
the
heart.
casualties of marine debris is only going up more and more.
Does most of the debris, I heard most of the debris actually comes from fishing ships out at sea, you know, with all the plastic netting and so forth versus land pollution. Oh, sorry, there's my dog.
Most of it is from rivers flowing into down into the ocean, is the biggest contributor of plastics in the world.
And we do see trash almost everywhere we go in the deep ocean. So, you know, everything is connected. These rivers are dumping into the ocean and through channels and you know, different conduits, they're making it into the deep sea, into all environments. So it's unfortunate, but almost every dive we do, we see some sort of human refuse in the ocean.
Question, sorry, my dog's barking. I'll ask this quickly and then I'll mute myself. From Tom, what are your opinions concerning scooping up mineral nodules from the seafloor? Is there a safe way to do ocean mining? And I'll let anybody take that.
Well, that is a big, big issue. And one of our responsibilities is we've been commissioned by our country to do what we affectionately refer to as the second Lewis and Clark expedition. But since 55% of our team are women in positions of authority, as you can see, I'm the minority on this call right now. We call it the Lewis and Clark expedition. But we, just like the Lewis and Clark expedition in the 1800s under President Thomas Jefferson, that exploration of the Louisiana Purchase led to a complete change in the economic engine of the United States, away from cotton and slavery and all of the things that were occurring at that time to what we saw when we opened up the West, and then led to the creation of the Yellowstone parks, the Park Service, but also mining, all the farmlands that came into being, cattle ranch. So the whole economy of the United States changed as a result of that acquisition of the Louisiana Purchase, with it at that time doubled the size of the United States. Well, when President Reagan picked up a pen and signed the Declaration of Law of the Sea, and he doubled again the size of the United States. So our mission is to do what Lewis and Clark did, is to go out and find out what we own. And we know that we're going to be finding mineral resources. We've already found mineral resources, but we've also looked at places that need to be protected. As you know, President Biden, shortly after becoming president, within hours, signed the 30 by 30 presidential order to set aside more and more of our country underwater to marine sanctuaries. So yes, we have to do the whole thing. Our job is to collect facts. And so our mapping effort will be then is funded by the American people through NOAA, and the results will be open sourced as we collect it. I think that's what you need to know, is that as we collect our data, it's open sourced and available to anyone. So we know that there'll be different interest groups looking at it, but like I say, our job as Sergeant Friday said in Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. So our job is to get the facts.
Got it. What is this question can go to all three of you. What's next? What's your next big project, or your next big adventure, or your next big goal? I know, Bob, you got the book coming out. Is it written, done?
Oh yeah, it's out. But the next one, I'll let Allison walk you through. Right now, the ship's against the dock, but we have some pretty exciting things happening, and then she'll be handing that scepter over to Nicole. So I'm going to toss it to Allison and Nicole for that one.
All right.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, in just 2 weeks, we're going to be mounting a very exciting expedition for us. And this is through the partnership that I mentioned before. So the NOAA Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute partnership. And that involves the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, the University of New Hampshire, University of Southern Mississippi, University of Rhode Island, and Ocean Exploration Trust. And so on this expedition, we're developing and testing some really cutting edge technologies to really try to push a lot of these efforts that we've been talking about to be able to map and explore the oceans more effectively and more efficiently. So we're going to have two vehicles on board that have never been on board Nautilus before. So one of them, they're both out of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. One of them is called the Nereid Under Ice vehicle, and that works as both an autonomous vehicle that can map the seafloor, but it can also be reconfigured and work kind of similar to what our typical remotely operated vehicles operate like. So it can be tethered to the ship and work in very similar ways. And then we'll also have a vehicle called the Mesobot, which really focuses on what we call the midwater, so the area between the surface and the seafloor, that is really looking at really interesting phenomena, and especially the biota that lives within the water column. So it has an ability to very stealthily track critters within the water column, and understand more about their migratory patterns and just really what exists there. So they've got some sampling capabilities that we take in water samples, and that collects what's called environmental DNA. And it's essentially a way for us, through DNA traces in the water, we can tell what lives in the water. So that's a pretty exciting expedition. It'll involve some new technologies in terms of relaying communications between vehicles. So we're really trying to push the envelope on what we can do with teleoperations. So removing some of the operators from the ship and actually having them on shore to be able to conduct some of those expeditions in that way. And that just really increases the footprint of the amount of people and the types of people that can be involved in our expeditions. And then from there, we're going to head out to Hawaii, and I'll let Nicole take you through those expeditions.
Hawaii.
Yeah, that takes us to October. So yeah, we're headed out to Hawaii just in time for some nice weather over there, and mapping the seafloor on the way across. So we've been across to Hawaii a couple times, and we'll pick a path that's parallel to a path we've gone before, so we can build out that grid of the seafloor, the map of the seafloor. We'll spend some time in the Hawaiian State EEZ or Hawaiian US EEZ to map a survey area before we go into port. And then we'll mobilize for a second mapping cruise that takes us into a more remote region. So it's the Papahana-Makuakea Marine National Monument. This is an area in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands that is one of the largest marine protected areas in the world. But when it was expanded to go out to the full 200 nautical mile US EEZ boundaries, we realized that very little was known about it. And so Nautilus has been there once before to map some of these unmapped seamount features and do some dives in 2018, but there's a huge area there that needs to be explored still. So we're going to spend about a month of time just doing seafloor mapping this year of some additional seamount features. And they're interesting because they're not thought to be created by traditional hotspot, how the Hawaiian island formed. And so we're mapping them this year so that we can select areas to look with the ROV next year and explore, get some rock samples to better understand how they formed, and also understand, of course, the critical habitats like sponge and coral that form in these deep water areas. And then after that, we have 2 more ROV expeditions in the season, and both of those are, again, in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands area. One is in an area called the Wentworth Seamount Chain. These are in the southern area of the monument. They've been mapped before, but nobody's ever taken a look at them to know, again, what lives there, how they were created, how old these seamounts are. So we'll be spending some time with scientists there. And our final expedition of the season, Dr. Ballard will be back aboard the ship, and Allison as well. This is an area called the Chautauqua Seamounts. These are a J-shaped seamount chain in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands that have a strange paper published in 1968 from some dredge samples that were taken, but there's been no exploration of them. And again, they're close enough to some shallower water areas that there's interest to understand maybe the connectivity of the types of organisms that live in these seamounts to other areas in the Hawaiian Islands. So some really exciting exploration in that area coming up. And that takes us through to the December holidays.
Wow.
And to follow up on that, I see someone asking a question. Bill Brown's asking a question. Do we also do scuba diving? And
Yes,
yes,
thank you.
actually, beginning next year, we're launching a wonderful program with the National Geographic Society and NOAA and other sponsors called From Shore to the Abyss, where we'll be spending the next several years looking at the health and well-being of America's coral reef systems, and they'll be involved with that a lot of diving, scuba diving. So for 4 months next year, starting in June, we'll flip the ship from a deep water exploratory platform to a shallow water one that even goes ashore. And again, that's will all be covered live as well. So yes, we're broadening our exploratory footprint, not only with our new autonomous vehicles that we talked about, both in the midwater zone and the bottom, or autonomous ship we're bringing in called Drex, which is an autonomous surface vessel. And now we're going to be adding diving into our portfolio along with drones. So yeah, we're really
Wow.
expanding our exploratory footprint like we've never done before. And as Allison said, we're going to start practicing a lot of that in just a few days.
Great. A bunch of questions come in. So this is a good one. This is a good old accounting question. How expensive are these ROVs and who funds them?
I'll let Allison do that.
The chief
Well, yeah,
question.
they can vary. You know, there are some commercially available ROVs that you can essentially, you know, buy off the shelf, so to speak. The vehicle that we have is a custom built, and so generally that often comes with higher costs. But they're multi-million dollars. The ROVs themselves, yeah, they're
Oh
very
God.
they're very specialized. You've got to have, you know, you've got to make sure that they can withstand the pressure of, you know, up to between 4,000 meters to 6,000 meters or even deeper, and for some organizations that have deeper vehicles. So, you know, it takes a lot of titanium, it takes a lot of specialized materials, and a lot of engineering behind it. So multiple millions of dollars.
I can see why you freak when you lose a couple. It's not like,
Well,
oh, I lost my cell phone, I'll get another.
yeah, the manipulators are alone are close to $250,000 a click. The
Oh my God.
cable's $250,000. It seems like everything comes in $250,000, $500,000 kind of price tags, and you don't get these at Home Depot.
Oh no, I wouldn't think so. Okay, let's see. We have another question here. From William. Is there a real garbage patch in the Pacific, or is it a term used to describe the problem of plastic pollution in our oceans? I guess, is there a real garbage patch? I think he means maybe besides plastic.
There's actually 5 of them, and that takes you to the oceanography of our planet. You know, our planet is spinning naturally, but it's not coupled to the water, so it's sort of spinning beneath the water, which sets up the circulation system we know about. We're in the northern hemisphere. Actually, if you flush your toilet or drain your bathtub, it goes clockwise. But if you go to the southern hemisphere, it's counterclockwise. So in the northern hemisphere, you have the gyre called the Sargassum Sea, which is going round and round clockwise in the northern Atlantic. You have another one in the southern Atlantic. In the Pacific, you have one in the northern Pacific and in the southern Pacific. But in the Indian Ocean, you don't have a northern Indian Ocean. You have India and everyone else. So there's only one in the southern Indian Ocean, which adds up to 5. And as they spin around, things accumulate in the center. And after that horrible tsunami and earthquake off Japan, that massive amounts of material went into the ocean. A lot of it ended up in the garbage patch that they call in the North Pacific. And some of it actually came ashore. So yes, there are these trash heaps that are caused by the rotation of the planet.
That have much more in them than just plastic.
Or they have anything that floats.
Wow. Oh my God, that's really depressing. There's a person who asked, I just saw it pop up. Can you see it there, Bob? They asked something about is the Titanic really decaying?
It's being loved to death. I think what you need to look at is as you know, we found it in 1985, went back in 1986 and mapped it extensively. Then we went almost 20 years later, we came back in 2005 and we did it all over again. And what we were able to do, and we published this in National Geographic, was we were able to compare a time series of what's happened to the ship when we found it and no one had ever touched it, to what has happened to the ship in the 20 odd years since. And we could superimpose them over one another. And we found that the damage was done where the submarines were landing, where they were crushing the deck. And then we could see areas where there was debris in the way or a mast fallen over where submarines couldn't land, and they were identical. So a lot of it has been done by coming in contact with the ship through salvage operations. So yes, some of that is self-serving by saying, well, we're bringing everything up to save it, when in fact they're doing the massive damage. So I don't want to have lawyers calling me after I finish my comments. So I'm going to just say, I think it's being loved to death.
You think it's loved to death. I can't let the conversation go by without a brief explanation from each of you. How did you get into it? We have a lot of young people watching. They want to know how to get into this area of study. I know there's a lot of different paths, but what was your path? And we'll start with Nicole.
Sure, yeah. Well, I was interested in the oceans from when I was a kid, as you mentioned in the intro, and was able to go to a university that had marine science. From there, I just kind of followed the coursework that I loved and took the courses that led me to want to become a researcher and find a research position and master's degree at Rutgers University, and then follow that up with a Ph.D. At the University of Delaware. And through that, I got into using more advanced technologies, and I was given the opportunity as a PhD student to come out on Nautilus. That was my first time at sea for an extended period of time. So it was definitely transformative to my career, where I was more interested in maybe coastal marine geology, shallow marine geology, but there's something about being at sea and being an explorer that is just really exciting and has, the history from there.
And Allison, how about you? You took a more circuitous route, I believe.
It did, and I think that's a really important thing to point out to any of the young people that are curious in how to find a career, that there is no linear path to a career like ours. There's not one equation for landing in any of our seats. And so I started my career like Nicole. I've always had a passion for the oceans. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, which does not have any coastline. But I always loved reading National Geographics and, kind of exploring through other people's eyes that I was able to follow. And of course, going to the beach when I could. I was begging my parents to let me get certified to scuba dive at the earliest age that I could at 14. Wow. So, I've always loved it. And then I started my career. I've always had a true passion for education. So I started my career as a high school educator. And then through a series of just events, I found myself at my first research expedition and just absolutely fell in love with it, and knew that I wanted to both combine my background in education and science with, my next steps in my career. So from there, I just kind of, like Nicole mentioned, just kind of figured out like where my passions and where my skills were intersecting. And just kept pushing through those doors as they opened. I think that's the magical equation, is just find out what your passions and your skills and how they align are.
Well, in my
Bob,
case,
if I recall, is it true a Disney movie had an influence on you?
Well, actually, yeah, very much so. But I, like Nicole, I was born in Wichita, Kansas. Where all oceanography.
Can't get further from the ocean, hardly.
And but then my family moved to California. I'm dyslexic, and so the moment for me was not reading the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but seeing the Walt Disney movie in 1954 when I was 12, and I fell in love with Nautilus. I fell in love with Captain Nemo, and I think I've lived my dream.
Wow.
My ship is the Nautilus, and I'm now working with Disney, which now is a part of the National Geographic partnership with National Geographic and Disney. So they're my dream team. I mean, Disney made me dream, and National Geographic helped that dream come true. And I think that's, you follow your passion, as Allison said. And for me, being dyslexic is an advantage in the underwater world I work in, because I can imagine it in my mind. It's totally
Really?
dark down there.
Huh, that's a great lesson for a lot of young, my husband's dyslexic, and he loved the Nautilus story and Captain Nemo. He was enamored as well. He did not go into ocean exploration, but but it's amazing how such similar inspirations come from sometimes the simplest things, a movie or a book. Or question for you, for both of you, actually, all of you. Yeah, you mentioned that your ship is now docked at Alta Sea here in Los Angeles, and you're building a 10,000 square foot interactive research center on the Alta Sea campus. That's on land. What attracted you to Alta Sea, and what are the plans? When might it, be open? What we'll be able to see there? Elaborate
Well, the
on that.
original person who brought me into it was Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's wife, Susan Whitehouse, who got her Ph.D. where I'm sitting right now at the Graduate School of Oceanography at the University of Rhode Island. And she was the chief scientist of the Alta Sea project and called me up because she knew we were moving our ship into the Pacific Ocean and we needed a home base. And again, having grown up in Los Angeles, this is hometown for me. The idea of being able to bring our ship and have it based in my hometown of California, Los Angeles. As like I say, I went to Downey High School. And so this was a dream come true. And then what we really want to do is, as you said, we're working with Alta Sea and other universities to build a marine campus that takes advantage of this easy access to the ocean. And what we're doing with Alta Sea is it's sort of like school groups and after school programming can come, and we're going to have sort of a interactive command center because we're tracking our ship at all times. We're building mobile systems. So it's sort of like letting school groups come and look behind the scenes and look at what's going on there. There'll be, vehicles being maintenance to them. We'll be shipping things and coming. So it's like coming to the hub of a very active exploratory program. And like I say, having a special behind the scenes tour.
Wow, but people are able to see how long will the Nautilus actually be docked at LA?
Well, we'll depart, scheduled to depart the first week of October. And then,
so there's a little bit of time. Could people physically go
we're
down and
gonna
look at it?
well, it's there now. I mean, we don't encourage people right now because of COVID, but you can drive by, you can see it. But yeah, we're going to be heading out to sea anyway pretty shortly. I think the best way to see the Nautilus is to watch it on the web because you're aboard. You don't have to wear a mask. Okay, you can be a part of our team, literally coming into our command center and virtually sitting next to us, and you can ask us questions all throughout our. If you go to our website, you'll see Ask a Question. We have a production facility there. We have educators, and we're able to answer questions of people just like we're doing right now, 24 hours a day once we're deployed. And I think we go back to see what, Allison, in a few weeks, right?
On the 23rd, of September.
We'll head back to sea, and
is that when you head off to Hawaii? You head over.
We're going to go working off Catalina for a while.
Catalina,
come back, and then we'll make our final departure. So no, the best is to do it virtually because it's safe, and you actually have a more intimate involvement, and you're actually on a real expedition.
Wow. Now, do you ever get into rough weather in the Nautilus, or are you able to really plan and avoid hurricane season, of course? Or are there times when, oh my goodness, you just encountered, a squall or anything like that?
Allison, Nicole?
Yes.
We've
been in some rough seas, but the beauty of forecasting is that if there's anything that's going to potentially put us in harm's way, we're not going to stay there. So we've had experience. Nicole was on board where we've been operating off of Hawaii, and we had hurricanes predicted to come into our path. And so we make sure that everybody is safe. That's our priority, and get out of harm's way.
Yeah, NOAA is our biggest sponsor. And as you know, NOAA knows the weather. So we're lucky. And also the Navy provides us. So between NOAA and the Navy, we get a lot of long warnings of where to be, and you just run away.
So nothing like if you're smart, pay attention, you can avoid bad weather. Not like some of these movies we see, The Perfect Storm, whatever. You can. What are they doing? Final thoughts about the future of our ocean's health, the key elements of future exploration as we close out the session here. Just your final thoughts as you look ahead. You've had amazing careers and many years still to go. What's your big picture of ocean exploration and ocean health?
Nicole?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could say that just the next expedition is the start of the future, really. The collaborations that we're having with these other institutions to bring more robots into the field, to be able to make better use of our ship time and just collect more information, and even just target the environment better. The Midwater tool is a really important robotic asset to understanding a huge ecosystem on the planet that we just know so little about. So as we advance robotics and advance our abilities to use these robotics smartly together and have them communicating, and kind of take some of the humans out of the loop, so that our space is always limited on the ship, and we could even have more people on shore who are following along or controlling the robots. I mean, that's really Bob's vision, I think, for the future and where we're going. And that's why this next expedition is just so exciting, because it's the start of those tests.
Wait, so you're saying that a person on land can control the robots under the sea?
Yeah,
Exactly.
we've done it. We did it in 1991. So
See, I'll assume it's from the boat.
So no, we can move command control to the shore, and ultimately we're looking at ships who won't have any humans on them.
Oh, like the Mars robot.
Similar to that, but up close
ocean.
and personal on planet Earth.
Yeah. And even come to think about it, if we can control a robot on Mars from Earth, I guess we can control some underwater vehicles from the coast.
I think we can cover that one.
See, I had in my brain different. I'm thinking you're on the boat and doing all this kind of thing. Other thoughts about big picture? What's next? What's your hopes for the future of our oceans and exploration?
Well, I think, yeah, I'll jump in. I think there's so much in the next generation, right? And so with everything that we do at Ocean Exploration Trust, we're really trying to both train and inspire the next generation to fill the shoes of the people that are going to be the operators and the researchers and just the lifelong learners of all of this, data that we're collecting and research that we're doing. And so I will make a quick plug on our website. We've got a lot of great educational materials that are freely available to any educator or parent or student that wants to access them. So on nautiluslive.org, you can find a whole plethora of activities and coloring pages and great lessons. Equal to the importance of science in our mission is ensuring that we've got a role model for every child across the world. And so we really want to be able to be that inspiration to have more people find their connection to the ocean and potential career paths as well.
See, once a teacher, always a teacher, huh? Bob, I'll throw out a different kind of question for you. If they made a movie about your life, would you watch it?
Well, they actually,
not a documentary.
Well, they did make a documentary that will be.
Documentaries are legitimate.
They did, and it'll be on Disney Plus in a couple weeks, I think.
Oh, they did.
Give us a release date, Allison, on.
It's October. I don't want to say the wrong date, but it's in the October 13th to 16th range, I think.
Right, and so and while you're waiting for that, go to Disney Plus and watch us do the Amelia expedition that Allison.
Oh, right.
That's on Disney Plus right now, and I see a reader in the UK on your chat session just read the book in the UK. It's been just released, the Into the Deep. So there's plenty. You go to the May issue of National Geographic, but
Well, there's stories we haven't even touched. We won't even get into how you found the Titanic after doing that top secret, you know,
more to come.
Assignment for it. That's a whole nother thing. That's amazing.
And
But
as we would say, as we tune out here in a few seconds, stay tuned.
stay tuned. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I want to remind our audience that this webinar will be posted at altasea.org. Also, September 24th, our next webinar will look more deeply into deep sea mining. We'll ask the deep sea mining, is it safer than mining the rainforest? So join us for that September 24th at noon. Our guest will be Dr. Greg Stone. He's the chief ocean scientist at the Metals Company. And one more thing we have to remind you of, we are putting on a wonderful event. You are all invited. Here, I'll find it somewhere. It's called, where is it, Jacob? I know Jacob sent it to me. The blue, here it is. Please join us. This is October 9th. We're celebrating the Blue Hour Ocean of Inclusion, AltaSea's annual fundraiser supporting our Project Blue education programs. And guess what? It's actually for real, like in person. Remember human beings? So join us then October 9th. This year, AltaSea is partnered with the Council District 15, planning the Blue Hour at Angels Gate Park. That's right next to the Korean Bell in San Pedro, overlooking the beautiful Pacific Ocean. Special guests include Philippe Cousteau and Earth Echo, Rachel Kropa from Footprint Coalition, and Dr. Giotica Virmani from Schmidt Ocean Institute. Emmy award-winning filmmaker Rick Rosenthal will promote a sneak preview of his upcoming nature series. Anyway, it's going to be a wonderful event. Again, that date is October 9th. For details and tickets, go to altasea-project-blue.org. altasea-project-blue.org. All right, that takes us 1 minute past 1. Thank you all. Your panelists are fantastic. Your work is important and inspiring. Thank you for taking being so generous with your time. So take care for everybody. Thank you for participating, and we will see you next time. Bye.